My name is Kobus Marais. I'm a lecturer at the University of the Free State in Linguistics and Language Practice. My focus is on translation theory, but with Journal for Translation Studies in Africa, I'm the editor.
You started the journal in 2019.
Yes, so the history of this journal is that in 2009 we started a summer school for translation studies in Africa, and in 2014 we had this in Zambia, and Paul Bandia, who is an expatriate from Cameroon, a famous professor in translation studies, he was our keynote speaker, and he suggested that we started thinking about not only having these meetings, but also providing a research outlet for translation studies in Africa. So after that, it took 4 years to plan it together with the board of the Association for Translation Studies in Africa. And yes, I did most of the groundwork, founding the journal, doing the negotiations, putting everything in place.
So how did you find it, the whole process?
Actually, easier than I expected mostly. It took longer because there were many more back and forths between, for instance, you and me, between me and the sub-editors, between us as an editorial team and the university, and between the university and ATSA, who is sort of hosting this. So there was a lot of back and forth, but it took a long time, but it wasn't all that difficult. It's hard work and it takes a lot of conceptual energy, but yeah, I think it's worthwhile. Firstly, there was, before we even got to the infrastructure, there was a whole lot of work being put into the conceptualization. So what would our focus be? What would our scope be? How do we think about translation, etc.? So we had about 2 years just of conceptualizing that. And then I think in about 2016-17, I contacted the university and I started the negotiations with them for hosting the journal. So I think both are important. If one fails, I think the journal will fail. So you need both a solid conceptualization and a vision of what you want to do, and you need institutional support and technical support.
Can you tell us a bit more about the focus and scope of your journal?
So in terms of our scope, we focus on translation studies. In other words, the journal publishes research. So we don't publish practical translations. We don't publish reviews of translations. We publish translation research. And we do that for a specific reason. In Africa, there are quite a number of universities who do very good translator training. Cameroon, for instance, Ghana, Senegal, Kenya, Mozambique. But most of that is focused on practical training. And well, the literature has shown us that if you don't create a group of people who can critically engage the current practices, you just repeat and institutionalize those practices. So we thought that for the development of translation studies in Africa, it's really important that what we do should develop critical thinking, critical engagement, broader thinking, not just the reduplication of practices. So we would focus on applied research, or we would allow for that, but as long as it's covered by a theoretical background. Our focus is also on Africa as a space, but we invite Africans in diaspora and also non-Africans who work on African topics in translation studies. We welcome their contributions because we would like to start some kind of dialogue between our issues and the issues in the rest of the world. Otherwise, we might get an insular kind of thinking. So we try to be as open as possible, as long as it is about the African continent. In terms of our scope, obviously then scholarly original research is what we are looking for. And we have defined translation much broader than any other journal, even in the rest of the world. In terms of our field-specific jargon, we accept interlingual studies on interlingual translation, studies on intralingual translation, and also studies on intersemiotic or multimodal translation. We also see interpreting as an important part of translation studies broadly, and we don't distinguish between professional and non-professional translation practices. So it's a really broad conceptualization. Also interdisciplinary conceptualization, because we know that translation is being studied in communication studies, media studies, journalism, psychology, sociology, medicine, cultural studies, development studies, and so on. So we are open for interdisciplinary papers on anything related to translation. I also just wanted to mention that we have three subsections to the journal, as it were. We have the, let's say, cutting-edge original research, which are research papers. But then we have a section called Future Voices. This section would be short summaries of master's and PhD dissertations about African topics. And Dr. Marley van Rooyen is the sub-editor there. Then we have a subsection called Agenda, which takes position papers. Dr. Francis Ayaji is the sub-editor there, and we have a book review section that reviews books on African topics, and Dr. Felix Awung is the sub-editor there.
I asked Prof Marais more about the different types of translation studies he mentioned.
Translation studies as a field is based on a distinction that Roman Jakobson, who is a famous linguist, made in 1959, where he said that there are three types of translation. There is translation between languages, which he calls interlingual translation. Then there's translation within a language, which he calls intralingual translation, and that would be things like rewriting. So just writing into plain language, for instance, would be regarded as a form of intralingual translation, or making a summary of an annual report of a company. You do it in the same language, but you just write it for a different audience, or you shorten it. Even in journalism, there's a lot of intralingual translation going on, where you get a news bulletin, let's say from CNN in English, and you rewrite it for a South African audience, still in English, but you rewrite it with a different slant. And then intersemiotic translation is a bit of a misnomer, but it basically refers to translation between different semiotic systems, in particular, let's say, verbal systems and non-verbal systems. So let's say I have a poem which is written in language, and I want to translate that into a piece of music or into a dance. That would be a typically intersemiotic translation. A lot of work has been done, for instance, to show how the poet Gertrude Stein took Picasso's style of painting and wrote poems in that style. And then other people took her poems and made those into dances. So those would all be intersemiotic forms of translation. Also in textbooks, you get this where you have a piece of text and then you have a diagram that summarizes the text. Then you have a photo as an illustration of the diagram. These things are related in a what is these days called a multimodal text, because it's not only written or not only visual, not only oral, but all of these together.
If you have an author that now has to choose to publish in your journal versus an accredited journal, how would you motivate that author to publish with you?
I would go on my knees and say, please. No, I think until we are accredited, we are probably going to find it difficult to get South African authors, because in the South African system, the subsidies are directly linked to publishing in accredited journals. So we are in a real hurry to get accredited. We had actually in our first edition, we had 3 highly regarded international scholars who published in our journal, and they on African topics. So yeah, I think it's caught between a rock and a hard place. You want people to publish, but you need to get accredited. Probably if younger scholars want to support us, they could submit the masters or a summary of it, masters and PhD studies, because typically you would also not get that published in a frontline journal anyway. So at least to get published. I think the other motivation of this journal would be that it's an open access online journal. So people don't have to pay to get this. So if you want to get published and you want people to know about your work and make yourself more visible, this is a good place to be, because scholars from, I think, third world, global south contexts will focus on these kinds of publications because they can get it for free. Making use of the agenda section, if you have an opinion piece that you think is relevant, once again, you wouldn't get subsidy for it, but it puts your views out there. And even book reviews. So you can put your book reviews don't gain subsidy, but you can put it on your CV. And that might be motivation enough for some, to at least start somewhere.
On the topic of accessibility and the open access, do you charge page fees?
No, not at all. And I think that is important, both on the production side for you as a young scholar, maybe, or an African scholar who doesn't have subsidies and funding with which to publish in a fancy journal. But also on the reading side, if you imagine that a good journal charges easily 30 to 50 euro or dollars for you to download a paper. If you can get that for free, and if you can get people to read your work for free, many more will read it than would read the high-level stuff, I think. I am really convinced that academic and scholarly work should be available. Otherwise, you just continue privileging a privileged few people. The publication costs, if you are willing to put in a bit of work yourself and maybe make use of postgraduate students to help do the work, is not that much. Definitely not what a publisher would ask you. That was sort of one of the things that I didn't expect. I thought it would be much more expensive, and it's not that expensive to publish an edition of a journal if you do it online and open access.
I asked Prof Marais about the importance of institutional support.
For me, the institutional support in terms of aligning the journal with best practice, sort of at the concept level, and in terms of the technical support that I got, I think that was crucial. If I didn't have that, I don't think the journal would have made it. So definitely, if one wants to do this kind of thing, I think unless you yourself are really well equipped in terms of technology, or if you have links with people who can do this, institutional support really helps. Yes.
Got someone that's never been in any kind of editorial role on a journal, and they want to start something new. What advice would you give them to start a journal?
My advice would be either not to do it or to get more experienced person to help you. First, if you have no experience, I would say first get experience. Try and do reviews for journals so that you can see how journals work. Try and become a sub-editor somewhere so that you can see how the systems work. If you have experience, then I would say you need to have your institutional and technical support. You need to make sure that you have somehow get somebody to give you a bit of funding for the production. And then I would say it's important not to be a fly-by-night. You have to follow the requirements of good publishing to ensure that there's credibility to what you are doing. Don't try to set this thing up as a major world-class journal. Rather build it up slowly, rather put all the systems in place. Don't be a fly-by-night, because once you've lost credibility, it's possible to get it back.